The situation in the Middle East is developing into a full-on regional conflict, and right now there are real concerns from a lot of folks that it could eventually devolve into World War III. So today we're going to break down some of the biggest developments from the past couple of days. We're going to go over what happened, what it could mean for the overall situation going forward, and then also how it could affect normal folks like you and me. One of the developments about the war in Iran that concerns me most is how it's pulling more and more countries into it. Last week we talked about how Iran launched strikes on several nations in the Middle East, and to do that, they use drones and missiles, and the use of drones is causing both sides to bring in expertise from countries that have experience fighting modern drone wars. Over the past couple years, the war in Ukraine has kind of become ground zero for the evolution of modern drone combat. Both Ukraine and Russia have used them for things like surveillance, targeting, and also direct attacks. That includes everything from small FPV drones that can chase vehicles and personnel, all the way to larger long-range strike drones that can hit infrastructure hundreds of miles away. And because of that experience, drone specialists who have worked in or studied the Ukraine conflict are being consulted by different governments around the world, including the United States. Several defense analysts and security officials have noted that the tactics being used in Ukraine, particularly things like swarm attacks and low-cost strike drones, are now influencing how other conflicts are being fought. The Middle East actually already has a long history with drones. Iran has been producing and exporting UAVs for years, including the Shahed series that Russia has used extensively over in Ukraine. But what's happening now is sort of a feedback loop. The battlefield lessons from Ukraine are now being studied and applied elsewhere, which means that future drone attacks in this region could become more coordinated. They could probably become more precise, and they're also going to be harder to defend against. The bottom line is that drones are highly effective since they're cheap, can cause a significant amount of damage, and they can quickly deplete stockpiles of an enemy nation's more expensive things like interceptor missiles. From a preparedness standpoint, that matters because drones are becoming one of the defining weapons of modern conflict. Even commonly available consumer drones can be used at a minimum to gather intelligence, or even deliver small payloads over short distances. And when you start seeing countries pulling drone expertise in from other wars into this one, it's a sign that the technology and tactics are definitely continuing to evolve. Then Russia stepped into the picture as well by providing intelligence to Iran. While that doesn't necessarily mean that Russian forces are directly involved in combat operations, the intelligence that they provide can still play a significant role. That can include things like satellite imagery, electronic intelligence, or general situational awareness that'll make it easier for them to target U.S. and Israeli forces. Russia and Iran already have an established relationship when it comes to military cooperation. Iran has supplied Russia with large numbers of drones during the war in Ukraine, and Russia has helped Iran with certain military technologies and training over the years. They've even made improvements to the Shahed drones that Iran provided to them based on experience gained in the war with Ukraine, and they are sharing those with Iran. And from Moscow's perspective, helping Iran directly could serve several purposes. First, it complicates the strategic environment for the United States and its allies. The more that they have to burn through things like interceptor missiles and other hard-to-replace munitions, the less that they're going to have to send over to Ukraine or fall back on in a wider-scale conflict involving Russia. Second, it strengthens a partner that's already been very useful to them. Even though the Russians may or may not want to risk putting boots on the ground, they really don't want the Iranian regime going away either. And then third, it allows Russia to influence events in the Middle East without committing its own forces to another war. And what we're seeing there is pretty common in major conflicts. Even when a war initially involves only a few countries, other players start getting pulled in through intelligence sharing, technology and weapons transfers, and strategic partnerships. And once all that starts to happen, the risk of the conflict expanding does generally become greater. But one area where this conflict is already causing problems here at home is the global energy market, and a big part of that is what's happening in and around the Strait of Hormuz. For those of you who may not be familiar with it, the Strait of Hormuz is one of the most important shipping choke points in the entire world. It's a narrow waterway between Iran and Oman that connects the Persian Gulf to the rest of the world. and roughly like a fifth of the world's oil supply moves through it. Every single day, massive tankers carrying crude oil and refined petroleum products pass through that stretch of water on their way to markets in places like Asia, Europe, and even the United States. So whenever a conflict breaks out in that part of the world, the Strait of Hormuz immediately becomes one of the most sensitive areas. And that's exactly what we're seeing. As of right now, the strait is effectively shut down, with traffic through it reduced by around 90%. Over the past several days, there have been multiple reports of commercial vessels being struck, harassed, or forced to alter course in and around that area. Some ships have reported drone activity, others have reported missile warnings, and a few have even taken direct hits. Shipping companies are now rerouting some vessels, increasing security protocols, and in some cases delaying transit through the area entirely. Even though U.S. and Israeli strikes have done significant damage to Iran's military, Iran still has ways to make going through the strait extremely dangerous. Right now, they're using a combination of mines, attack boats, missiles, and drones that are hard to completely eliminate. And ships don't actually have to be destroyed for this kind of disruption to have a major impact. Insurance rates for tankers start climbing, shipping companies begin charging higher fees to offset the risk, and when the price of moving oil goes up, then the price of oil itself almost always goes with it. Energy analysts have been warning that if the situation in the Strait of Hormuz continues to escalate, the effects on global energy markets could be severe. Iran knows this, and they're using it as leverage. Their new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, recently said that the closure of the strait should be used as a tool to pressure the enemy. There were also reports that the IRGC announced that any Arab or European nation that expelled U.S. and Israeli diplomats would have full right and freedom to go through the Strait of Hormuz. So right now, it seems that Iran is attempting to put both direct pressure on the U.S. in the form of higher energy prices and also indirect pressure from other nations. In response to this, governments and energy organizations are trying to figure out ways to ease the pressure on markets. One option that they're doing right now is using strategic petroleum reserves. These are large emergency stockpiles of oil maintained by countries around the world. The idea behind them is pretty simple. If a major supply disruption occurs, then governments can release oil from the reserves to stabilize the market and prevent prices from just going completely out of control. According to the United States Energy Department, they're going to be releasing 172 million barrels of oil, and the International Energy Agency has also indicated that its member nations will release 400 million barrels total. The IEA coordinates emergency energy responses among dozens of countries, and in past crises, they've organized large-scale releases of reserve oil to calm markets. This is the largest release that they've ever done, and is only the sixth time that they've released oil to help balance markets. But even with those safeguards in place, there are still concerns about what could happen if the conflict escalates further. Some market analysts have warned that in a worst-case scenario, especially if multiple export routes are disrupted, that oil prices could continue to spike dramatically. And when you start hearing numbers like $200 a barrel for oil just being thrown around, that tends to freak people out pretty bad. And when oil prices surge, it doesn't just affect people filling up their cars. Higher energy prices ripple through almost every part of the economy. Transportation costs increase, manufacturing becomes more expensive, food prices can rise because agriculture relies heavily on fuel for machinery, fertilizer production, and shipping. So the bottom line is that a major oil shock doesn't stay confined to the energy sector. It spreads through the entire global economy. And that's one of the reasons why conflicts in this region tend to have consequences far beyond the battlefield. Even if someone lives thousands of miles away from the Persian Gulf, economic effects can still show up in everyday life at places like the gas pump, at the grocery store, and just the overall cost of living. So as always, do what you can to have a good buffer supply of food, medication, fuel, and other basics that you use daily stored at your home. While your stockpile may not last forever, it could help you get through the worst part of what we hope are temporary price increases. Another development that's been raising concerns, especially here in the United States, is the possibility that this conflict could eventually find its way back home. And one of the issues being discussed right now involves drones. Iran has spent years building up its drone program. They've produced a wide range of systems ranging from small surveillance drones to larger, long-range strike drones capable of traveling hundreds and in some cases over 1,000 miles, just depending on the platform. One of the scenarios that's been discussed by analysts involves using long-range drones or drone launches from offshore platforms targeting locations on the U.S. West Coast, particularly California. The FBI released an alert to police departments in California that stated the following: "We recently acquired information that as of early February 2026, Iran allegedly aspired to conduct a surprise attack using unmanned aerial vehicles from an unidentified vessel off the coast of the United States homeland, specifically against unspecified targets in California, in the event that the U.S. conducted strikes against Iran." And this is obviously concerning since Iran has the technology to pull this off, and California has things like major ports, energy infrastructure, military facilities, and technology hubs. Those types of locations tend to be high-value targets in any type of conflict, and drones present a unique challenge compared to traditional missiles. While Iran doesn't have ICBMs that can reach the United States, drones don't necessarily have to be launched from thousands of miles away. Having them launched from vessels operating closer to the U.S. coast is completely plausible, and if there's a lot of them, then at least some of them are going to end up getting through. Then another area that officials are watching closely is cyber activity. In modern conflicts, cyber attacks are often used as a way to retaliate or apply pressure without crossing the threshold into direct military confrontation. We've already seen that play out in multiple conflicts over the past decade. And in the past couple of days, one company that found itself caught up in that environment is Stryker, a major medical technology manufacturer. Stryker produces a wide range of medical equipment used in hospitals around the world. That's everything from surgical tools all the way to orthopedic devices. Reports indicated that the company experienced a cyber attack on Wednesday, March 11th, that disrupted its systems. While full details of the total scope of the incident have kind of been limited, cybersecurity analysts have pointed out that healthcare and medical supply companies can become targets during conflicts. Part of the reason for that is that those companies play a critical role in the healthcare infrastructure. Disruptions to supply chains or hospital systems can have real-world consequences very quickly, and cyber attacks don't always have to shut down entire networks to cause problems. Sometimes even like partial disruptions, things like delayed shipments, compromised systems, or temporary outages can create ripple effects, and almost every area of modern life is vulnerable to attacks like these. That includes electrical and water utilities, communications infrastructure, transportation, and a lot more. So from a preparedness standpoint, this highlights the fact that conflicts aren't just fought with things like tanks and missiles anymore. Many times strikes are more subtle, but can still reach far beyond the actual battlefield. That's why security agencies in the United States tend to increase monitoring when conflicts like this break out. They're watching for cyber activity, potential infrastructure threats, and really any signs that foreign actors might try to carry out operations closer to home. So, in addition to having basic supplies at your home, also keep some cash on hand, preferably in small denominations, just in case banking systems go down. Then have a backup communications plan in case cellular and internet services go offline, along with ways to collect and purify water off-grid. Then another area where this war has a lot of people concerned is the cost. Military operations are extremely expensive. Just moving ships, aircraft, and troops into position can cost billions of dollars before a single shot is even fired. Right now, estimates from defense analysts suggest that the early phase of this conflict has already cost several billion dollars across all sides involved. That includes the cost of air operations, missile strikes, naval deployments, defensive systems, logistics, and the ongoing mobilization of forces throughout the region. For example, operating just a single modern fighter jet can cost tens of thousands of dollars per hour when you factor in fuel, maintenance, and their support crews. Precision-guided munitions, things like cruise missiles or advanced bunker-busting bombs, can cost hundreds of thousands and even millions of dollars per unit. And precision-guided munitions are a big point of concern right now. It's estimated that the U.S. and Israel used over 2,000 precision-guided munitions and interceptors in just the first 36 hours of the conflict. The overall cost for these was over $5 billion, and on top of that, these kinds of munitions are also pretty difficult to replace. Because of how their supply chains work, it can take anywhere between 18 and 24 months to produce a Tomahawk cruise missile. Historically, only around 100 or less of those have been produced each year, but there are plans to expand that capacity to around 1,000 per year. Beyond the immediate military spending, there are also indirect economic costs. We already talked about how energy markets are reacting to the situation, but governments may also have to increase defense spending, reinforce security at home, and prepare for potential retaliatory actions. And all that pulls resources away from other areas of the economy. Then at the same time, when you look at a war like this, the other question people start asking is whether or not the objectives of the operation are actually being achieved. From the perspective of the United States and its allies, one of the primary objectives has been to degrade Iran's military capabilities, particularly systems that could threaten regional stability, shipping routes, or allied forces in the Middle East. Initial strike packages reportedly focused on specific military infrastructure, including things like missile facilities, drone production sites, and command and control centers tied to Iranian military operations. And many of those targets do appear to have been successfully hit. Satellite imagery and independent analysis have indicated damage to several installations believed to be connected to missile or drone development. But as with most conflicts, achieving tactical success doesn't necessarily mean that broader strategic goals have been fully met. Iran still maintains a large military infrastructure spread across the country. Many of those facilities are hardened, deeply buried, or widely dispersed, which makes them pretty difficult to eliminate completely through just airstrikes. In addition to that, Iran has a network of allied groups and proxy forces throughout the Middle East region. Those groups operate in places like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, and they have their own capabilities, including rockets, drones, and missiles. Even if certain facilities within Iran are damaged, those broader networks can still pose challenges for regional security. Another objective often discussed in conflicts like this is deterrence. The idea is that a show of force will discourage further aggressions by demonstrating the consequences of them. But deterrence can be difficult to measure in real time. Sometimes it works, sometimes it leads to escalation instead, and then other times it creates a long standoff where both sides continue applying pressure in different ways without either one backing down. And right now, analysts appear divided on how successful this operation has been in that regard. And when it comes to deterring other nations like China and Russia, they're going to be watching this conflict closely. They'll be very interested in how successful the U.S. is at meeting its objectives, and they'll be keeping track of how much of their munitions stockpile they use. Now, earlier in the video, we talked a little bit about the drone threat to California, but there are other ways that we could face threats here at home as well, particularly from sleeper cells. So, if you want to learn more about how to protect yourself and your loved ones from potential sleeper cell attacks, then click here. Or if you want to see items that you should buy over the next month just in case prices get jacked up more than they already are, then click here. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.